Hey all, welcome back to my channel. It is me, MsNoBuntu, DIV, divinely inspired, vibrantly anointed, artist of God. And I was just downstairs and minding my own business, and God took me right back to Revelation 2, from verses 18 to 29. And he had more to say about Jezebel. So stay tuned and I will expound more on what God has revealed to me. So I'm downstairs minding my own business, drinking some tea or making some tea. And God goes back to these scriptures in Revelation 2, verses 18 to 29. There where Jesus Christ is now talking to one of the churches and is saying, you've done this very well, but here's my problem with you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel. And then Jesus commences to expound on what he's going to do to Jezebel and to bring Jezebel to his or her downfall. And, you know, I've been meditating on this scripture and in pushing down Jezebel, in pulling down Jezebel. You know, I've been really meditating on the scripture. And as I was downstairs, God took me back to verse 26. Let me read verse 26 for you. It says, and he who overcomes and who obeys my commands to the very end, I will give him authority and power over the nations. If you remember, as I have mentioned before, a Jezebel spirit is what in worldly language or in psychological language is typically falls under the narcissistic character traits and activities. There are very close similarities between a Jezebel embodied person, a Jezebel spirit embodied person, and the narcissist and the activities of the Jezebel. And also let me say that, just in case I forget, that a Jezebel spirit is literally witchcraft. And if you look at First and Second Kings in the accounts that include Ahab and Jezebel, as well as in Chronicles 1 and 2, in the chapters 1 and 2 of Chronicles that include accounts of Ahab and the activities of Ahab and Jezebel, you will see that a lot of the activity was very much witchcraft, very much sorcery. Put that to the side. So I'm thinking about the scripture where it says, if you overcome, if you listen and you obey and you overcome, you will have your authority and power over all the nations. And I was like, what does that mean, God? What does that mean? He said, it means that every time that Jezebel comes against you to try and taunt you, to try and abuse you, to try and bully you, to try and intimidate you, to try and manipulate you into controlling you, into submitting to him or her, when you don't submit, when you don't bow down, which is what God has called each and every one of us not to do, to not bow down, to not submit to the demands, to the intimidations, to the wiles of Jezebel. Do not submit. He's called us to not submit to these things. And it says, when you do that, you don't give your authority and your power away. But when you do, you give bits and pieces of your authority and your power away. And the more you do, the more of your authority and power you give away. The more you go along with what the narcissist is crazy making about, the more you go along to get along, to avoid that vicious, vile, witchcrafted attack of Jezebel, of the narcissist. And a lot of people do this, they go along to avoid that vicious, vile attack, right? And God was saying to me, but the more you do that, you lose your power, you lose your authority. And I have proof of this. I have dealt with this a number of times in the form of narcissism, in the form of witchcraft, where people wanted me to subjugate me and wanted me to submit to them in an ungodly manner. And people who are corrupted, people whose soul was debased and defiled, wanted me to bow down to them, you know. And when I didn't do it, although it brought on the strong attack, what happened, however, is that I did not lose my authority. I did not lose my power. And Jezebel, the narcissistic spirit, Jezebel's spirit, has the power to work through nations, through different people, nations of people who are wounded, jealous, and hurting about something, and refuse to deal with that, right? And so when the spirit is working through these different nations, if you give in to avoid the fight, to avoid the confrontation, that's where you lose your power. But if you don't give in to avoid the fight, to avoid the war, to avoid the battle, to avoid the punishment, you keep your authority and your power. And if you keep holding on and standing your ground, this is what God is talking about in Revelation 2:26 when he says, and you will have you will have authority and power over the nations. He means that you will not have given up your authority. You will not have given up your power. So it will be intact. And the more you do it, the stronger you get in your power and in your authority to stand in the midst of the crazy making of a Jezebel embodied human being, a narcissistic. The more you stand in authority and power and refuse to bow down and refuse to go along, to get along, to avoid the fight, the greater authority, the greater power that you hold on to, and also it gets cultivated. The greater you have the kind of threshold to stand in the midst of that attack. And because I was just asking God, what does that mean? That, I'll have power and authority over the nation. It says, when you don't give in, when you don't bow down, when you don't go along to avoid the confrontation, your power and your authority gets strengthened. You wielding your power and your authority, it gets strengthened, it gets deepened, it gets widened, it gets stronger. Every nation that comes against you in this manner, in the manner of the Jezebel, in the manner of the narcissist, when you don't bow down, you get strengthened. With every encounter, your power and your authority is strengthened. And if it's all the nations that you have to go through in standing your ground, then that means the result when you stand in your ground against all the nations is that over all the nations, you will hold power, you will hold your authority. This brings me so much joy in my heart. Like, God knows the difficulty of going through this, but he's also saying, don't bow down. Keep your power, keep your authority, stand your ground. And the more you do it, the stronger your power and your authority gets. And I don't know who I'm here to talk to, but do not give in, do not bow down, do not go along to avoid the confrontation or the fight or the attack. Stand your ground in the right and just thing, in the uncorrupted and undefiled thing. Stand your ground. Do not allow narcissists, do not allow the Jezebel threat and the intimidation to get into you and to change you into a into a puppet in their games. And the more you practice not allowing yourself to be used as a puppet, the stronger you get. The stronger you get the stronger you are able to stand in the midst of all of that manipulation and intimidation. And therefore, the stronger your authority, the stronger your power is in those environments, in those instances, in those attacks. Thank you again for tuning in. I really appreciate you, and I will see you again next time. Just a reminder, if you find this video very helpful, please make sure to share it with someone who think might benefit from hearing it. And also, if you have consistently come back to this channel and have enjoyed the content that is on this channel, please consider subscribing and also hitting the notifications bell so that every time that I do upload, you are notified and you know about it. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you again next time.